board. He remains a leading expert on the elitist Trilateral Commission, their policies and achievements in creating their self-proclaimed new international economic order. An economist by education, a financial analyst and writer by profession, and an American constitutionalist by choice, Mr. Wood maintains a biblical worldview and has deep historical insights into the modern attacks on sovereignty, property rights, and personal freedom. Such attacks are epitomized by the implementation of UN policies such as Agenda 21, Sustainable Development, Smart Growth, and in education, the widespread adoption of Common Core state standards. Mr. Wood is a frequent speaker and guest on radio shows around the nation. His current research builds on Trilateral Commission hegemony, focusing on technocracy, transhumanism, and scientism, and how these things are transforming global economics, politics, and religion. The end game, if ignored, will result in scientific dictatorship. Welcome, Patrick Wood. Thanks for making time for us.
Thank you, John. It's my privilege to be on with you.
Well, thanks, sir. I tell you, just that little bit of narrative is actually quite frightening. And I'm wondering, they have this grand, the Trilateral Commission. We actually haven't talked much about the Trilateral Commission. Really, I don't think we've addressed it as a subject at all on the program so far. The Council on Foreign Relations, yes. The United Nations, yes. All that, but Common Core, yes. But not the Trilateral Commission. So I'm really looking forward to this conversation. I'm not sure. Is there a new international economic order working out for them, or not really?
So far, it's worked out pretty well. Their strategy has been almost flawless since 1973, and that's not a compliment, by the way, but they have been very successful at accomplishing their objectives. So this is what we see today. And as we go through this, I'll just say I'm a big picture kind of a guy. I always have been, starting in the 70s when I first started to write about the Trilateral Commission. And my goal is to elevate the view of what's going on in the world so that people can get an expanded horizon and understand a little bit better, connect the dots a little bit better, if that makes any sense.
Well, I am not going to just go down a list of questions and just fire them off at you. So if you'd like, you are completely at liberty to just run this thing and start wherever you want to, and we will follow.
Well, that sounds good, and I hope that you just interject when something comes to mind.
Absolutely.
I'll make some points along the way here and try and explain what it is that I'm laying out here. I'll start out by saying that that I started tracking the Trilateral Commission in 1977, and I teamed up with a gentleman who had just been booted from the Hoover Institution for War, Peace, and Revolution at Stanford. He was a scholar and a writer. His name was Anthony Sutton, no H, just Antony. And Tony Sutton was an acknowledged expert on the transfer of technology from the West to the East. He'd written several volumes. They're still world-class volumes today. Very expensive to find in the used market, too. But he got forced out of Stanford because of David Packard, the president of Stanford at the time, was a member of this Trilateral Commission. And Tony was doing research on this group, and he apparently was getting a little bit too close. And they decided that it would be good to get rid of him. So they did. And I met Tony at a gold conference down in New Orleans. We happened to sit together at a table for eating breakfast. The place was crowded. The waiter just said, "Look, if you want to eat, you're going to have to sit where I tell you." And I said, "Oh, no, I hate
European style."
Yeah, so I sat down across from this guy, and it turns out he was a Brit, had an accent. And so that was fascinating to me as a young guy. And so we started talking, and in about 30 minutes, I told him some of the work that I was doing at the time. And he told me some of his story, and we realized that we were looking at exactly the same people from a different perspective. But we're looking at the same group of people, this so-called Trilateral Commission, and we didn't quite understand independently what we were looking at. We knew something was screwy, but we just couldn't quite get a grip. And so before the end of that breakfast, Tony and I had shook hands that we were going to pool our resources and write a newsletter called the Trilateral Observer.
Excellent.
And out of that came two books, Trilaterals Over Washington, Volume 1 and Volume 2. And those books stayed the kind of de facto, revelation, I guess, of the Trilateral Commission in those days. And even today, people still reference that book to find out, some of the early stuff. So Tony Sutton passed away in 2002. And with him, all of his research was lost. It was a very unfortunate story, but he had lost all of his research along the way, and there was no more stuff. He had dozens and dozens of cardboard boxes of original research that he had done on various topics.
And this stuff was just tossed into the rubbish heap?
It was just tossed in the rubbish heap. In the last part of his life, he had a little bit of health issues, he had financial issues, and somehow the research got jettisoned along the way and went to the landfill. Go figure. Well, it put a lot of pressure on me because I had duplicate research on the Trilateral Commission, and what he had, I had, and I said, oh my gosh, Tony's gone, his research is gone. How are we going to, somebody has to tell his story. And so that's when I got back into the game in a really serious way to reignite the research on the Trilateral Commission and move forward. And in the process of doing that, I started writing again under the name of August Review. It's now August Forecast and augustforecast.com. But I started to write again and research, and along about 2005, 2006, I ran across a topic that was rooted in the 1930s in history. And I've always kind of been I've always had an interest in history. I wish I'd studied history in college, actually, but I've always had an interest, and I ran across this movement from the 1930s called technocracy. Never heard of it in my life. I had no clue what this group was. And I looked at some of my favorite history books, and lo and behold, there was nothing, absolutely nothing. And yet I knew it existed because I had some original pictures and a couple of pamphlets and whatever. So I started to research technocracy. I just couldn't help myself. And I went all over the place digging up archives of original correspondence and booklets and newspapers and newsletters and stuff that they had put out. And I found out that technocracy, historic technocracy, had a very relevant connection to the present. And we'll explain this as we go along. This was a mystery to me at the time, remember, but as I moved forward with it and studied it more, I became convinced that the Trilateral Commission had resurrected, if you will, historic technocracy. I think maybe a better word would be hijack. These elite groups typically don't have any original ideas of their own, but they're masters at hijacking other people's ideas. That's just been my experience over the years.
Sounds familiar.
And so, so I don't expect that they invented this in any way, shape, or form. In fact, back in the 1930s, this movement called technocracy did not have any institutionalized money behind it at all. The Carnegies were not there. The Rockefellers were not anywhere in sight. They did have some institutional support with Columbia University, but there was no big money for them back then. So the global elite were not backing technocracy in the 1930s. But in the early 1970s, they picked it up and they began to move it forward. And what really struck me, John, in the end of this was because we had studied this phrase, new international economic order, until our hair almost fell out. And we never could quite put a finger on what they meant. Is this just like rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic or what? Is it Keynesianism? Is it something else? What are they doing with this new international economic order? Technocracy put the light bulb on for me.
Yeah.
That was the new economic order that they were talking about in 1973 when they were first started. We'll talk about that a little bit as we go along. So that's kind of a little bit of my background, how I got to where I am. I published a book, by the way, on my work for technocracy. As you know, it's called Technocracy: Rising, the Trojan Horse of Global Transformation. And that really does have a summary, a very good summary, documented summary as well, of the research that I've done in recent times and connecting it to the Trilateral Commission. So this has led me, in any case, to say, my little tagline to the subject is that the dark horse of the New World Order is not communism, socialism, or fascism. It is technocracy. And I will justify that statement as we go along. But the first question that comes up is, what is being transformed? Transformed is a word you hear all the time now in the media. You hear it at the United Nations. You hear it in these elitist groups that are meeting. The word transformed, and it does have a special meaning to them. You'll appreciate that, I think, as we go along. But we need to understand the word as well. What's being transformed, because it's us. Basically, it pertains to us. And so we see that economics are being transformed. Government is being transformed. Religion is being transformed. The law and the legal system and the rule of law, what's left of it, is being transformed as well. We have energy, things like smart grid and so on. Energy is being reformed today. All the talk about energy and green energy and stuff is all related to technocracy. And I dare say that even humanity itself is being transformed in some very unusual ways. And even beyond that, Christianity also is being transformed. And so, okay, if all this transformation is going on, the next question comes up: who is doing the transformation? What are the elements of this? Well, element number one, I will lay at the feet of the Trilateral Commission. You'll see as we go through this how important this group has been and is today in the transformation of all these areas of society. Secondly, technocracy is doing the transformation, because we see technocracy at the root of all of these programs. And I'll explain this as we go along. Then we have the United Nations. We can't leave them out, because they have been the publisher of the ideas, if you will, to the contagion, to take it to every corner of the world. And then we have a number of non-governmental organizations who are major players in this whole scenario. So the transformation is taking place right under our noses, and the kinds of programs, the types of programs that we need to look at in order to see the transforming crucible are things like Agenda 21, that was originally created at the 1992 Rio Conference, the Earth Summit in Rio de Janeiro. That produced a doctrine of sustainable development, which we see everywhere in the world today. Then we see programs like smart grid, the reformation of energy, the collection of energy with these smart meters on the side of your homes and your businesses. Then you have the whole area of climate change. That's a huge, huge pillar in technocracy. Well, we'll explain climate change as we go along, but it's in the news all the time, Oh,
yes.
Then we have cap and trade. That's another thing that people don't understand very well, but it's also been in the news. We can thank probably somebody like Mr. Al Gore for creating and popularizing cap and trade. Al Gore, by the way, I'll mention right now, is a member of the Trilateral Commission.
I'm shocked.
Smart growth is another thing that has to do with what cities are doing these days with the stack and pack type housing projects, where the apartments are on top of the retail stores, where zoning laws are changing radically, where they take away rights from property owners left and right. Programs like the green economy, we'll look at that. The green economy is described by the United Nations very succinctly. It'll blow your mind. And then we have the whole area of human enhancement, which covers topics like transhumanism. And I really don't necessarily intend to talk about transhumanism this session, but